All
Very
right.
cool.
Woohoo! So we're live. I'm Lisa Kastner, and I'm here with Jeff, one of our amazing, amazing, amazing authors. So he has this incredible novella in the Running Wild anthology, volume 7. And you guys need to go, you need to check it out. It is super, super cool. But for purposes of today, I am going to ask Jeff a bevy of questions, and we get to hear what what those answers are. So we call this 20 questions. In reality, it's more like 30 something, but who cares? We just do it, right? Right. Awesome. Okay.
Stoked.
So first question: what is the first book you remember reading?
So, like the first book was probably The Hobbit when I was like a little kid, and I
Oh
remember
wow.
my mom. Well, it was like, I mean, the ones behind that are like just a blur of like pictures and stuff. But the first book. But I do remember very specifically about that is my mom got it on interlibrary loan, and it
Mm,
was actually the first edition, so it had a different Gollum. I know my friends now say you should have stolen it. But like, come on, man.
right.
Like, I didn't know any better, but I do remember remembering a different, sequence of events for Gollum and stuff because it
Mm.
changed it later on. And so for Lord of the Rings nerds, they'll be shaking their fists, I'm sure, at me.
No, that's cool. That's
So
really cool.
so that was a surprising one that I didn't realize until later. I'm like, oh, everybody read a different book than I did. Oh, interesting.
I didn't realize that he changed it later on. That's really interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah, he was a very go back and tweak stuff kind of guy.
Got it.
Apparently.
Huh, cool. Okay, so who's your favorite author in whatever genre? You name the genre.
My favorite author, probably the one I've read the most, and this is gonna, is probably Victor Hugo. I love Les
Mm,
Miserables. I've read it many, many
mm.
times. Even the boring parts where he talks about like the monastery for like goodness
Ah,
knows how many chapters. I do turn that up to like 3x speed if it's on Audible, but like, a little faster. But
mm,
just some of the character development in that is pretty bonkers, pretty amazing.
mm. Yeah, definitely. It's funny, everything I listen to, like, on podcast or, like, Spotify or whatever, I listen at what on 1.2.
Yeah,
Like, I don't listen 'cause I don't listen at 'cause it just feels like I'm wasting time. Like,
yeah, it's like
isn't
let's
that
go.
weird? Yeah,
Yeah.
like, come on. We've got things to do. So I'm not the only one, yay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so who influenced your writing?
Um, I think in terms of like the honest answer is probably a lot of Star Wars and a lot of like nerdy sci-fi, like the old Star Wars extended universe.
Mm,
And I love Philip K. Dick and some of the like the sci-fi writers.
mhm.
So that probably influenced a lot of what drew me towards science fiction and fantasy for sure.
Yeah, cool. Very cool.
Very
Uh,
nerdy.
hey man, we're all nerds. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
True, true.
So which books made the biggest impact on you?
I do think Les Miserables, and then some of the stuff by George MacDonald. Like I really loved his approach to fairy tales, which are like he kind of has these like really. Some of them are like more kiddie, but he has some like really fantastic like kind of like grown up fairy tales that are really dark and almost surrealistic and amazing.
Mm,
So
mhm.
if anybody's what or read The Shadows by George MacDonald, it's amazing, and it's definitely I've written not like my most the novel I'm working on right now is like
Mm.
kind of draws a lot on kind of that like kind of dark fairy tale world, which I think is just like so great.
Nice, nice. That's awesome. If you could only read one book for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Mm. Well, I mean, being a religious person, there's a Bible study answer, but like selfishly, I would probably, in terms of like a fiction book, I would probably be going for Les Miserables. It's just so darn good. I've read that
Excellent.
many, many times, and man, I still get choked up at the end, and like it's
Mm,
crazy. I don't know how he does it. It's so good.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
That is awesome. So, and you kind of already answered this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
go for
What
it.
do you reread all the time?
Um, so if not Les Miserables, I do reread my fantasy sci-fi. So I've reread Harry Potter many times.
Hmm.
I've reread a lot of the Brandon Sanderson fantasy books many times. I think it's just like, that's one of the great things about, writing is it can just kind of give you a break from so many things, and like those kind of escapist fantasy books I gravitate to quite a bit.
Well, and I don't know about you, but like when you reread it, don't you kind of you discover something new every time?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm such a big fan of rereading books because
Hmm.
like the writer, poor writers, we've read the book like goodness knows how many times and gone through it goodness knows how many times. So
Hmm.
you kind of get a better, you see more angles that only going through it and knowing the end, and I still get excited, and I still like love the exciting parts, and I'm never one that like gets mad at folks online about spoilers. I'm always like, oh, it's all good. Like, I'm gonna read
Yeah.
it again. Doesn't matter.
And when you listen to the audiobook, the discover even more things because the narrator brings so much to it. So, yeah, totally.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
What book would you save in a book burning?
Ooh, what book would I save in a book burning? Um, Trying to think of like I'd probably save like old like any old like fairy tale books like I like a Grimm's tales or something like that. I just
Mhm.
like those need to be preserved. Those are just these amazing, like such amazing pieces of history. Like I don't know, I you can ask my wife. I nerd out a lot about fairy tales and fantasy stories and stuff, but
All good.
yeah.
What inspired you to write this novella?
So this one was Departures was a fun one. It was initially started by just like a writing exercise and sort
Mhm,
of just generating ideas and like doing a bunch of first pages. But I always when I joked that one of my colleagues, that if he died, he'd show up to work the next day.
mhm,
One of my like he knows. I've told him. I jokingly say that the books or the novel is about him. But no, I think it's just sort of like tech culture. And I worked in tech for a while, and
mhm.
it's not always it's like not always the healthiest culture I've ever seen or experienced. If that's like euphemizing it enough. But yeah,
Euphemizing? Yeah. Mhm,
but um but yeah, it's yeah, there's a lot of darkness and like
mhm,
real human darkness, like not just like, oh, like so and so like took credit for my thing. There's like things that I feel like actually affect people's lives beyond the scope of work, and
mm,
have like a permanent impact. And so
mm.
I was like, yeah, like what about the afterlife? Like let's see what happens. So that was kind of the premise of Departures.
Nice. That is awesome. Okay. So, who do you actually allow to read your book when you're writing it?
I mean, literally anyone I can like corner and pin down to actually read it.
That's awesome.
Like, hey, you! Like, see some poor person walking down the street. My wife, unfortunately, has to read it, or else she'd be in trouble. I'd be like, hey, why didn't you read? But no. So my wife is amazing, and she reads a lot of the prototype work. But yeah, I'm always like, if anybody's watching this, like email me. I'll send over whatever you want to read, because I'm always of the mind of like, the more information I can get about what's working and what's not, and what's
Mm,
accomplishing the goals of the story, and what's like working against them is like it's gold, right? So I'm
mhm.
always into farm as much feedback as I can.
Nice. That's awesome. If you were at a dinner party with 4 seats, what 4 authors or other people would you invite?
For authors, I think I would be very interested to talk to. I think like modern authors like Brandon Sanderson.
Mm,
I would love to talk to probably like some of the folks I mentioned, like G.K. Chester. Like, but outside of that, I think oh gosh, Francis Schaeffer is really
okay.
interesting. Like in terms of like philosophy writing, like has done really interesting work. and
Mhm.
like very predictive, which is like, how did you know that this is what our society was going to struggle with like 50
Mm.
years before we started struggling with it? You know, like
Mhm.
that stuff kind of blows my mind. And as like a writer, it's kind of our, part of our job is to sort of say, hey, watch out, like we're going in a weird direction. But that person really hit the nail on the head. And so, yeah, and
Mm.
then just a selection of fantasy sci-fi writers that I would just nerd out about stuff with.
Cool. Very cool. What is your drug of choice?
Ooh, I think after a very tiring day, it will definitely be whiskey.
Nice.
So yeah, I do. One of our friends go to this event called Whiskeys of the World, and they always
Mhm.
have some pretty yummy stuff that I have to like try to be like, okay, I got to put this on the shelf. I'm gonna put this on the shelf, and you know,
And
so
the next thing you know, somehow
you know,
it's in a
where did that?
little.
Where did that? It was here a second ago. Yeah. So yeah,
Very
but
nice. What book is your guilty pleasure?
ooh, I'm pretty shameless with my books.
Mm.
But in terms of like what at least like wouldn't be considered literary, I really liked. Oh gosh, it was like I think a self pub, just like super fun urban fantasy called Minimum Wage Magic,
Oh,
and there's a little
interesting.
trilogy, and it was just great. Like like it's they're I respect the author that's just like, hey, we're
Mhm.
here to have a great time and just have a blast, and it just was like completely just fun, fantasy urban fantasy adventure, and that was one I read recently that I was like, yeah, this is great, but my grad school colleagues would probably raise an eyebrow at this one.
That's awesome. Um, so what movie or TV show is your guilty pleasure?
Well, I think the one I've definitely watched the most is probably Star Wars. So a lot of Star
Mm.
Wars related things. Um, trying to think of like guilty pleasure. What would be the like comfort food movie? Hmm. Yeah, probably Star. I mean, like I've probably watched Star Wars an unholy amount of times just
Okay.
because like it is that just background comfort food, or
Mm.
Harry Potter because that's like Christmas season. It's
Mm.
almost a Christmas movie, and
Mm.
so that would be another one that's like get a cup of cocoa and like sit down and don't put too much whiskey in it.
Right, right. That's awesome. Do you read with music or with complete quiet or some other sound?
So yeah, I think it's a mix. Like I would say, music is definitely. I, I definitely write more with music now,
Mm.
because there's this great app called Brain FM that like if
Hmm.
you're a very ADD person like myself, it's supposed to help you focus. Whether it actually does as advertised,
Mm.
I will let posterity be the judge, but the placebo effect is well at work at least, and I'm like, I'm definitely focusing more, so I just listen to that most of the time.
Awesome. That is awesome. If you could ask for one thing to change the world, what would it be?
Mm, yeah, I mean, I think, hmm, I think just kindness, like because I'm trying to like
Mm.
what waterfalls to like the most, like hey, like all like the all just like the violence that happens in this world. Like I think if it's just hey, we can just you know, do unto others a little bit more.
Yep,
I think that would
totally.
be amazing, though it's easier said than done, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, totally. What does your reading environment look and sound like?
Well, I my office is out of my garage, so if I didn't have this little curtain behind me, you would see like a bunch of junk everywhere. Yes, so it would be quite chaotic. But so quite chaotic reading environment, and then I do work at a lot of like coffee
Mm.
shops as well. So generally, we'll be reading through something at Starbucks or one of the little local spots around.
Nice, nice. Paper, ebook, or audio?
All of the above, I would
Mm.
say. I definitely like probably ebook and audio are more than paper. I love paper. I have piles of paper books,
Mm-hmm.
but the expediency of like I have my phone in my pocket and it always has a book ready to go is pretty hard to beat when it comes to ebook and audiobook. So
Nice. Um, Who would you cast as your main characters and why?
For departures, I think that'd be interesting. It'd have to be someone kind of maybe like the is it something Garfield that played one of the Spider-Mans at some
Mm,
point?
okay,
Kind of like a little bit, all over the place, but I think that would be a fun one. James
cool.
Garfield is it? I should look it up, but yeah.
All right, now I have to. Hold on. All right,
Oh yeah.
so
Let's see if
Spider-Man.
I
Yeah, dude, you nailed it. James Garfield.
Yeah.
Wow, check you out. Oh no, wait, Andrew Garfield.
Oh, Andrew Garfield. There you go. Andrew Garfield.
Still, man, that's a lot better than I'd say 90% of the planet. So that's pretty cool. Okay, awesome. Um, if you could meet anyone, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Hmm. I would probably go back to that Francis Schaeffer thing and just sort of be like, how did you know? Like, these would be the things that our society would like have issues with because of like the things we were thinking about in like the 50s and 60s and 40s,
Mm,
like, and he's like, hey, this is probably where it's going to wind up, and sort of like, oh, it's kind of where it wound up. And
mhm,
that
mhm.
was I would probably try to figure out how he nailed that so well.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Um, okay, describe yourself in 5 words.
Hmm. Probably intense, uh, very nerdy. Probably 5 words. Probably obsessive. Very like locked in on things.
Mm.
Um, just like food. Does food count? Like anything with
I
like candy? Yeah, food
totally.
and then dessert.
Okay, all right. Describe your life in 5 words.
Ooh, life in 5 words.
Mhm.
Let's see. All over the place daily.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Totally. Totally works. And what was your last guilty pleasure? It could be anything, food, activity, whatever.
Well, probably the most recent was I'm from the South originally, and so I measure my. I know this is kind of like a cop out guilty pleasure, but I do measure how much sugar I put in my coffee by the
Really?
number of seconds you pour in a cup of coffee, because that was like how, and I thought everybody made.
That's how you did it.
So
Yeah.
you just go like 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds. Okay, that's how much coffee, how much sugar is in my coffee. So a very, very sweet coffee is probably like the most recent like guilty pleasure for sure.
Wow. All right. That's pretty cool. That
Yeah,
is
but it's like
very
the
cool.
sweet tea kind of vibe.
Mm,
Very much like you just, as
go
much
for it.
as much as you can get in there. Yeah.
Okay, if you could write yourself into a novel, would you be the hero or a villain and why?
I'd probably be a villain, and most of it's probably because of like the Southern guilt. Like you always feel
Mm.
bad. You're always trying to be polite, and you're always like falling short of like that ideal politeness.
Yeah.
So like that self perception is definitely slightly villainous, where you're like, oh, I wasn't polite enough, or I wasn't this enough. So
Huh.
definitely villain.
Wow. Great answer. Is there anyone you dream you could work with and why?
Ooh, what would be some fun person to work with? I think I really this is gonna be a very nerdy deep cut, but Takeshi Kitano is one of my favorite film directors from Japan.
Mm.
And if hey, if you're watching, if you ever want to adapt one of the projects I'm working on, let me know. That would be really fun because I think the visual style and like the stuff visually he brings to the table with film is like pretty wild. So I'd be in
Mm.
for that.
Nice. Two truths and a lie.
Oh man, oh this is a new one. Let me think. Ooh, I'll do my wife always jokes about my weird hobbies, so
Hmm.
I'll do hobbies, and you can see if you can guess the false hobby.
Okay.
Uh, Leatherworking,
Okay.
macrame,
Okay.
and beer brewing.
I want to say beer brewing.
Is the truth or the falsity?
The falsity.
That's correct. Oh, there you go. Nice. Perfect.
Oh, that's
Nice.
awesome. Okay. When was the last time you ran wild? What did you do and what made it wild?
Well, my brother is a very adventurous person.
Okay.
So the last time I literally ran wild was he took me mountain biking. And rather
Hmm.
than going on the safe trails, he was like, let's do the advanced ones. And
Mm.
we ran quite wild. Like he literally ran into the side of a mountain.
Oh
And
my.
he was okay, thankfully. But I definitely, learned that, hey, I probably should moderate my speed while running wild a little bit more cautiously in the future.
That's awesome. Um, what is on your playlist?
Ooh, I do love soundtracks from
Mm.
movies and stuff. So just no words, just something to kind of give a great atmosphere. Like that is pretty. So like anything Lord of the Rings soundtrack, anything
Mm.
Marvel soundtrack. Those are just
Hmm.
great, great.
Got it. Disney, Universal, Warner Brothers, or another studio?
Ooh, I would probably say Disney, and yes, because they now own Star Wars and all these things that I love, but
Mm.
also like Disney was a really interesting person. Like obviously
Hmm.
had quite a few issues, but he's like, just a very interesting point of view on life as well. So just an interesting guy to be like, huh, like that's the mind behind this humongous
Yeah.
company.
That's definitely a biography. If anyone has a chance to read it, you've got to read that biography. It is, to your point, it is pretty crazy.
The Walt Disney. I should. What's it called? If you mind me asking.
I read it so long ago. Hold on.
I'll hunt it
Uh,
down. I love biographies, so I have to always like get them.
Oh well, there's like a bajillion now. I read one. I mean, I think I read it like 30 years ago, but it was like absolutely incredible.
Ooh, all right.
I'll have to look it up for you, and
No
I'll
worries. No worries.
yeah. But it was yeah, it was very cool. But to your point, it was one of those that was like this is the crazy guy behind, like, but
Something that's
crazy but
refreshing.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and how he absolutely changed entertainment, like, period, So,
Yeah.
okay. You actually already answered the next couple of questions. So, tea or coffee? Coffee. Appetizer, dessert, dessert.
Dessert. Dessert.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Ooh, chocolate.
Okay. And then, is there anything else that you want to share?
More just thanks to Lisa and the awesome team at Running Wild. That it's been absolutely fantastic seeing the work y'all have been doing, and I, as a writer, like seeing all the different work styles and all the different folks out there. I've been really encouraged and impressed, and I'm rooting from you for we're rooting for you all from over here.
Well, thank you. It's been truly a pleasure, Jeff, having you as a part of our family. And guys, don't forget, you want to go out, you want to check out Running Wild's novella anthology, Volume 7, to see Jeff's story, Departures. That is very, very cool. So, with that, thank you so much, Jeff. It's
Thank
been
you so
truly a
much.
pleasure.
Have a great one. Take care.